All right, so here is the black and white. So this is a photo that I shot in Death Valley. I made two exposures of the scene, one with the red filter and one without. And this is a location I had photographed last year. But when I returned to the area this year, my second day there's some kind of nice clouds there. I do wish they went all the way across, but you know, it's fine that they're there. I have a light leak right there, and possibly a hood blocking right there. The film holders I'm using for black and white now are slightly suspect, so this is just more so proof that I need to figure out which of those film holders is causing a problem. But this was a late afternoon photo. Dunes here illuminated. When I returned to the location this year, it was interesting because there was a really crisp dune edge there. Last year it was rounded. Last year I shot this, I shot it with a normal lens, so I used a wide angle this time. Pretty dark over here. Atmospheric haze kind of brightening that up a little bit. And one of the things I was curious about was this bush right here, because everything was moving. There was a lot of wind, and it's got a little evidence of wind, but it's not bad. And I exposed this when there was you have sunlight here, shadows starting to form here, and there's kind of an in-between, which kind of created a path. So we'll see how that one looks. I do wish there was more clouds, but I was working with what I had. But it's decent, but light leak there and a hood obstruction there. That's gonna suck for the color, because I know that I'm gonna have issues with that on color. Unless this is the one where I used the red filter and the hood was popped out further, which might be the case. It's kind of interesting one. We'll see how it scans. I mean, this is all snow in here, and then the clouds, it was basically kind of a whiteout sky. And the sky and the snow were about the same brightness, which I had metered at, I think, almost 3 stops greater than neutral. It was like 2.7 to 3 stops greater than neutral. But there's this area here of red sandstone, and it kind of created this interesting sort of lightning bolt sort of shape. The trees, I think, give an interesting sense of scale. I have no clue until I get this one scanned if I'm too bright or if I'm okay. So I'm looking under a loop. I have detail in the snow. And the sky, I don't know, it's hard to tell. It's just bright, so it's hard to see for certain. May possibly be a slight sign of a light leak there, but this was my 600mm lens. This is my first photo with a 600mm lens. So, interesting. This was the unimaginative photo of the Towers of the Virgin area. I am a bit too bright here, though. It was bright, so maybe it'll be okay when I scan it, but that is pretty bright. I got detail in the foreground, but I'm not too dark there. I think on one of these ones I had a little bit of sky. This was taken with my normal lens, and it was a matter of kind of just stopping down quite a bit. I don't really have high hopes for it. I'm not in love with it. Well, actually, it's backwards too. I had to look at the peaks to see which orientation it was. I don't know. We'll see when it gets scanned, but it looks like it might be kind of weird with it being so bright here. Not in love with it. I thought I was blocking the sun, but apparently I wasn't. I got some flare going on there. If I shot this on several different days I exposed this scene. So we have this cottonwood tree here, and it was in sun, a little bit of snow in the background, and in the background is Angel's Landing. But this one has flare. This is a bad shot. I was trying really hard to work around that by holding a dark side up while doing the exposure. The exposure itself seems okay. Foreground bright, trees should be in sun, background should be dark. But that one itself is not going to be good. Thought I controlled that, but apparently I didn't. This is my second exposure of black and white of the Towers of the Virgin shot. Here the sun's coming up, so that's in sun, that's in shade, foreground shade. Exposure looks decent, or definitely pretty bright up here, but we'll see how it scans. But it's a photo I thought would be kind of cool because there's some snow on it, but that being said, it's literally the webcam photo. So, I don't know, we'll see. We'll see once it gets scanned. Okay, so now here, this must have been the second day I shot that. Tried to shoot that photo. And trying to get a sense as far as which way this was. It was this way. This one might be pretty decent. So you got the stand of cottonwoods, a little bit of grasses and some bushes in the foreground. This is all in sun. This back here is in shade. I use my normal lens. I don't see any light leaks. I think what I was going for is trying to make it where this wall back behind it kind of seems to go up forever. This is kind of like you see pictures in Yosemite sometimes, huge granite walls. In this case, this big sandstone wall with these interesting textures, but kind of living in the shadows. This might be a cool photo. It'll be interesting to see how that one is when it gets scanned. I do have another variation of that as well. That's one of the first ones I've seen I'm actually okay with. And then this is my second exposure of that scene. I shot one of them at a slightly different time than the other, as the shadow was kind of moving. And so one of these, I guess this is the earlier shot, this is the later shot. I'm really curious to see how this area here with Angel's Landing looks when it gets scanned, as well as how the snow area looks when it gets scanned. I think that has a lot of potential for being a cool shot. So that's cool. I'm happy with that. Of course, it's a vertical. So this was kind of an interesting scene. It's really hard to tell even what we're looking at here. But I'd hiked up to Scouts Lookout, and there was this spire you kind of look down on. It had some snow on it, and it was also backlit. So it was kind of, there's sort of halo lighting kind of around the edges of it. And there's a little bit of light hitting the front of it from light that was kind of hitting down below me. And then little trees and stuff down there. I don't know, maybe it'll be a little muddy, maybe it'll be interesting. But we'll see, a little bit of dust there on my film. We'll see. And actually what's interesting here, this wall in the background is the same wall as what was in the other photo I just showed. Then here's a double of that. I did bracket my exposures because I'm still not quite sure as far as perfect exposure for black and white. I think the other one, well, we'll see when I get them scanned. The other one might be a little better. This one might be good too. I don't know. We'll see. And now this is interesting. So I'm guessing this is the non-red filter photo of this. A little bit of a sort of a dusty little dirt devil down there, which is interesting. Because I'm not chopping off the edge up here, where I think the hood was when I was using the red filter. Might be decent. Definitely the sky stands out from the mountains, and from those mountains there's some clouds in there you can see. That one might be kind of cool too. Oh, I can also see that this was shot a little later because the band here of kind of partially sunlit, partially shade is smaller than the other one. So this is definitely the non-red filter. So note to self, if you use red filter, be very careful of that hood because it just kicks the whole holder out a little further. And in that case, my color photos shouldn't be affected. It'll be interesting to see how the old Dirt Devil turns out. I might be okay with that shot. We'll see. Sweet Jesus. This has got to be the best photo I've ever taken. This is my 8x10 selfie. This is the duck face photo. And I believe I am focused. Let's check out the nose hairs. I'm in pretty good focus here. Not perfect, but good enough. So, this is my 8x10 selfie. I'm actually framed pretty good. You can't tell where I am. It's f14, use my wide angle lens, 1/60th of a second. Pretty decent exposure. Got me some bokeh balls back there. But yeah, probably the best photo I've ever taken. That's hilarious. And then, that looks incredibly goofy. Looks weird, negative. My other shot, my glasses need to be clean there. Same sort of thing, bridge selfie, goofy smile, focus right on the face. Yeah. Focused a hair in front of me, but it's focused good enough for what it is. That's funny. That was a shot I've been threatening to do for a long time. And it looks like maybe a little bit of a light leak up there. So I gotta overhaul my film holders a bit. So that's the black and white. I'm gonna get things set up now for the color. All right, it's time for the color negative film. So this is that same scene I already showed you on the black and white. And the color will be interesting here because it was a very subtle color. Obviously no real color on the trees. A little bit of greens and stuff over on the hillside. In the foreground we kind of tans with some reddish rocks. And then you have the big, huge wall of Angel's Landing with all the textures and stuff. This would be interesting to see how the color compares to the black and white. I'm pretty happy with the composition. I see no flare, so it looks like I controlled that pretty well. And I should also mention that this photo, as well as the black and white, these are the ones where my shutter was broken on my normal lens. And so I had to just kind of guess on a half-second exposure. And it looks like I did pretty well. So that's kind of cool. I mean, I like the way it looks in negative. We'll have to see how it looks when it gets reversed. And here's my second shot of that. I always shoot doubles on stuff just because you never know. Stuff happens. You get light leaks, you get weird flare sometimes and all that. And this was taken probably within 10-15 minutes of the other one. And I was watching as the light was moving. And I think I shot color first, then I shot black and white. So those both look pretty good. Let's check out the trees here. Yeah, we're very sharp. It'll be interesting to see this one. It's not your typical Zion shot, and that's one of the things I like about going back to Zion over and over again. So this is my Towers of the Virgin shot in color neg. I shot color neg well before sunrise, and I was freezing when I was making these exposures. But my thought was shoot color neg early on when there's a subtle glow, then switch to slide film as the exposure times get a bit faster, and then do black and white once the light gets harsher. And this actually looks to be a pretty decent exposure here. I'm getting a little bright in some areas, but I mean, we're talking snow, and that shows what white is, so the sky is going to be pretty blue. The Earth's shadow hadn't yet set back behind the towers here, so it's going to be very blue. At some point there were some clouds. I don't know if it was during the slide film or the color neg. I don't see much evidence of clouds here, but there's some very subtle clouds at one point. So far I like that better than the black and white, but it's hard to say until I scan it. A lot of movement from bushes moving. The trees have a little bit of movement too. It's not horrible. And there's some other structures and stuff back in here I had to try to hide. As far as if I place my camera just the right area, I kind of missed some of that. When I first got designed, there was some snow clinging over here, which is pretty cool. And this was shot pretty early on the trip. This is on my third day. It'd be interesting. It'd be nice if there was a little more going on in the sky, but maybe the color contrast between the warm tones and the blue sky with then the cottonwood and stuff, the kind of earthy tones in the foreground. Could work. But so far I do like that better than the black and white. And here's my second exposure of that. One of these was taken much earlier than the others. The other. Let me flip them this way. So this one's a lot more orangish, which probably translates to bluish. So this might be the earlier exposure. And I should also mention that these are complete guesswork as far as the exposure. After a while, you kind of, especially for longer exposures, you just kind of guess. And it looks like my exposure is pretty good. It's actually kind of hard to get long exposures wrong, especially if you're starting an exposure well before sunrise and you stop it. One thing you'll see here, that is the headlights from a car as I was driving through. I was trying to block it with my hand, but by the time that one started happening, it already happened. But that being said, that's easy to fix in Photoshop if it's a decent photo to begin with. Don't see any evidence of clouds. I don't know. We'll see. Webcam shot. So here's that scene I showed you in black and white, this time in color. So what you'll see in this one in color is a lot of snow. All the kind of the dark orangey browny stuff is snow in the sky. And then you're gonna have just like this kind of orange kind of vein of sandstone. It's a sheer face, it just doesn't have any snow collected on it. It'll be interesting. It's gonna be a very high-key photo. It's not my usual style, but it just was so bold. And this was also the first time I'd used my 600mm lens. But let's see how some of this looks. Trees are sharp, and there is some detail in the snow. So I think it'll be interesting to check out how, especially how like the trees and stuff look. It'll give a sense of scale and make it a little less abstract-y, but we'll see. And then my second exposure of that. I think it was darn near the same exposure. I do see I have a little bit of differentiation here between the snow and the sky. But it is going to be a very subtle sort of photo. I didn't use Velvia on this one because I thought it might be a little too much for Velvia as far as the contrast between, the white sky, the white snow. It was very flat light, which typically I use Velvia on, but I thought with the sky it might look a little weird for Velvia. We'll see. So that is the end of my color negative, and now I'm going to get things set up to show the slide film. So we'll start out with that is the Towers of the Virgin shot. Now you do see the clouds there. Now this was also a bit of guesswork for the exposure. I was just metering like crazy, and I wanted to make sure I had exposure on the snow but not being too bright, not being too dark here. And this is very magenta-ish, but that's because the sky behind me was just lighting up like crazy with the magenta. I do like the winter trees. I almost feel like I need to control the magenta a little bit in the foreground to bring some of the greens back. But well, I guess we'll see how the light on this compares to the color negative. But my exposure here is probably like 40 seconds a minute, somewhere in there. When I look in the loop, I do see some of the buildings and stuff back there. It's hard to hide that stuff in the wintertime. A hair of movement in some of the grasses and bushes. Foreground's actually pretty darn sharp. This is one of those, set your hyperfocal and shoot kind of scenes. It's pretty decent. It's not going to win any it might win an unoriginal award, but it's not going to win any awards for originality. What's interesting on this one is that when I set up this photo, I set it up the day before, and typically I just leave my camera overnight, but that's not something I can do for a scene like this. This is like 70 feet behind the visitor center. So basically I put some rocks down kind of on the ground, marking where my tripod legs go. I took another rock and made a mark on the other rock, kind of using it like chalk. So I was able to figure out where to put my tripod. And then I set up my camera the day before, got everything all locked in place the way I wanted, and simply took the camera off the tripod and carried it back to my car. That way that morning all I had to do was just put the tripod legs on the rocks where I had marked it, and then it was all set up to take the photo. And that part actually worked pretty well, and there are clouds, so not too shabby. Here's my other version of that. This one's interesting. I like the foreground color better on this one. I'm getting a little bright on that snow. I mean, I do realize snow is white. Though, it's okay. I think this one shows the winter cottonwoods a bit better. I'm kind of cool with this shot. Again, not winning any awards for originality, but somewhat unique conditions as far as snow. A little bit of clouds, but a very kind of a subtle, kind of a peachy sort of sunrise. So I think I'm okay with it. Come to terms with my iconic location photography. This is kind of cool. I'm digging this one. So when I was wandering around the washes on the east side, I was looking for some sort of ice abstract photos. And this area caught my attention because it still has all the trademark little pebbles and rocks and stuff from Zion. You see that it just says, hey, this is Zion. But I like these kind of crazy, rock bits or ice bits kind of shooting out from the rock. Kind of cool. We get a little dark here, but I could always lighten that up a little bit. There's naturally a shadow here because that's just the end of the wash. This has a really interesting look to it though. Exposure is really good. Sometimes I get concerned because shooting photos like this is difficult. It's hard to get tack sharp because there's other stuff at play, but to my eye that looks pretty darn good. Yeah, we're sharp. It's kind of cool. I think if I just brighten this corner here up a bit, I think we'll be okay. That's my normal lens. This is also a little bit of a, inspired by one of the photos I shot in the fall trip, which was just kind of the rocks and leaves and stuff arranged kind of like the Milky Way, but on that particular photo I didn't get it very sharp. There was something that happened. But this one actually turns out pretty good. I'm actually pretty happy with that. This is a photo I really wasn't expecting much from. but I was many days into the trip, and I was just trying to find something to shoot because I was feeling rather unproductive. And so this is the hike actually that takes you up to Observation Point. The trail kind of cuts through here quite a bit. But I saw this interesting, wall of sandstone here and thought, hey, that might be interesting. And maybe if I warm it up a little bit, it's interesting is that this almost makes it look like granite, but it's all sandstone. It's actually a little bit warmer tone to the eye, but this is this is as the sun was setting. I should say probably a little after the sun had set. So it makes it go kind of grayish, kind of bluish. Maybe if I warm it up, but I don't think it's gonna have much interest. One thing I was battling here was the snow was so incredibly bright, and some of these areas were so dark. And so maybe this snow area, yeah, it's a little too bright, but it's not something I was really thinking would turn out all that amazing anyways. But it will be interesting to see how the photo I shot earlier with the trees and the cliffs look, because that could be interesting. So here's one of the Death Valley shots. And I should have gone a little brighter. I was really questioning my exposure on this. I'm okay here. I'm okay. I'm at the limit of what's reasonable for exposure. Any darker, I'd be in trouble. But it's always a challenge to try to figure out how to expose this versus this, and that dark area there is still problematic, but pretty natural results actually. Now, it was interesting as I used a little bit of a tilt here on my wide angle lens to sort of capture this dune ridge here all the way out to there. So this should be sharp, but I'll probably get soft down here. You can already even tell, even not looking at a loop. Little sparklies here as the sand was catching the sun. This bush here was moving in the wind. It's not horrible though. And actually, as I look in the loop, I have enough detail there. So if I choose to use this photo for anything, there's a sufficient exposure for it. Here's my double of the ice scene. Should be the exact same exposure. It's kind of cool on this. It may be hard to tell on the video, but these little ice bits here are kind of floating over the top of the rocks there. So what happens is the water freezes, and then some of the water drains back down into the sand. And so you end up having these kind of shells of ice. But in this case, it was just starting to freeze, and then the water drained away, so I get these little like spikes. It's a very natural color too. It was a little bit overcast when I shot this, so it didn't go blue. I was really curious how that would turn out if it go blue, but it actually stayed very natural, which is nice. And again, just like the other one, I gotta lighten that corner up just a little bit to get rid of that natural shadow there. And I think there might be some frost and stuff down here. Just a little bit. But that's pretty cool though. Just a double on that one. This one seems a little darker than the other one. This is closer to sunset. Though I think the other will do better as far as overall exposure. I got detail in there too. So even though it looks really contrasty on the video, it's actually not quite as crazy as it looks. Actually, maybe brighten it up a little bit there. It's probably a little more accurate. I don't know. We'll have to see how the black and white looks. In all honesty, I was pretty tired when I got to Death Valley, and so it was a little hard for me to find new subjects. I was just kind of worn out. And then this is my earlier shot. This is my safety shot for that scene. And because what's happening is these clouds are blowing away, and I was trying to get a photo where their clouds are still in there. I get a little scratch there. Let's see how that bush does. It's whipping around a little bit, but it's not bad. And actually, I have sufficient detail if I ever choose to use it. But not horrible. Just not innovative. This was one of my last photos I shot. Well, this was my last photo I shot in Death Valley. And there was all these crazy blooms. And there's like this doesn't really show the scale of it so much, but there's like this big mass of like these sort of lava rocks. I don't think they're lava rocks, but they look like lava rocks, dark rocks. And all these little daisy flowers kind of all over them. And I wanted to wait until after sunset so the rocks would go kind of cool. And then the flowers would look like little stars. It's actually not bad. When I shot it, I thought it'd be pure crap. But it's actually not bad. Certainly not the best photo I've ever taken, but kind of interesting. But I had a hard time kind of showing the sparseness of these rocks combined with the flowers. And I used my 450 lens for this one. And there's a little bit of movement, but it's not bad. A little tricky exposure. But I don't know, maybe it'll just look like weeds, but it's kind of interesting. And then this is a slightly brighter exposure. This must have been one I took, I don't know, maybe I did it earlier. What's interesting, these flowers are moving around like crazy, but they actually look relatively still in the photo. Might be a decent photo, it's hard to tell. I guess it'd be a case-by-case basis as far as which ones are showing the most motion. Sometimes it's better to scan a slightly brighter one than darken it down a bit in post. But at least it's something different from Death Valley. So, my thoughts on the pictures. There's some of the black and whites I'm curious about. Some of the color ones I'm curious about. Definitely know that there's some issues with some of the film holders I'm using for black and white, so there's some that I probably need to retire. This one's a little bit of a surprise. Not exactly amazing, but maybe a hair unique for Death Valley. But I don't know, it was a weird trip. It was a weird trip in the fact that I didn't have any of those like wow moments when I was taking photos. By the time I took this photo, I was pretty much done with the trip. But I'll have to sit on these for a while, scan some of the black and white, see what I think. There's some decent stuff. Nothing super groundbreaking, I would say. Though I really did like that ice photo. I thought that was pretty cool. And maybe it's just because I'm not usually one to photograph ice. But, oops. It's like, move the whole camera. But that one's kind of cool, kind of abstract-y. And there's enough detail to brighten that up a bit. So, I don't know, I do think I got some good stuff, but definitely large format, and especially 8x10. It's the type of thing where photographing the big wide scenes is sometimes difficult, but sometimes it's those subtle, smaller scenes that really make for interesting shots. I think the more I look at this one, the more it'll grow on me. But I just, at that moment in time, I really wasn't in a mentality to shoot too much. But I want to thank everyone for watching, and we'll see you around on my next trip.